The trading post smelled of death masked by grain. Tuari knew that smell the moment he dismounted, tying his Mare to the hitching post outside the weathered structure that sat alone in the valley like a wound in the earth. It was not the clean death of a hunt or even the slow rot of neglect, but something darker, something human and afraid. He had ridden 3 days south from the Gila River country, following the word of a trader named Ezekiel Moss who was said to deal fairly with Apache and white men alike. Tuari needed supplies, ammunition, coffee, salt, and he had a fine dappled Mare to trade, stolen from a Mexican rancher 2 months back and broken gentle under his hands. The Mare was worth twice what he needed, but Tuari had learned long ago that fair dealing bought more than gold ever could. The valley stretched wide and empty around the trading post, rimmed by red mesas that caught the late afternoon sun and turned it copper. No other horses stood outside, no wagons, no sign of life except for the thin curl of smoke rising from the chimney. That should have been his first warning. A trading post with no customers in the middle of the week was like a waterhole with no tracks. Something had driven them away, or something kept them from coming at all. Tuari moved quietly across the hard-packed dirt, his moccasins soundless. He wore no war paint, no ceremonial dress, just buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt he had traded for in Tucson, his long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. His rifle rested in the crook of his arm, loaded but not cocked. He was not here for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding men like him. Apache men in white territories where the war was supposed to be over, but never really was. The door hung crooked on its hinges, one corner dragging in the dirt. Tuari pushed it open slowly. The interior was dark after the bright sunlight, and he waited for his eyes to adjust before stepping inside. Shelves lined the walls, half empty, stocked with canned goods, bolts of cloth, coils of rope, sacks of flour and cornmeal. A counter ran along the back wall, cluttered with scales and ledgers and empty whiskey bottles. Dust floated in the shafts of light that cut through gaps in the roof. No one greeted him. The silence pressed down like a hand over his mouth. Tuari's grip tightened on his rifle. He could hear something now, faint, barely there, breathing, ragged and shallow, coming from somewhere beyond the counter, deeper in the building where the storeroom would be. "Moss," he called out. His voice echoed in the empty space. No answer. He moved forward, his boots now making soft sounds on the wooden floor. Past the counter, a narrow doorway led into the back. The smell was stronger here, sweat and fear and old blood, and beneath it the sweetness of rotting grain. Tuari stepped through the doorway into the storeroom. Feed barrels lined one wall, stacked too high. Crates of ammunition and tools filled the corners. A single lantern hung from a beam overhead, unlit. The breathing was louder now, coming from behind the barrels. He raised his rifle, finger near the trigger, and moved closer. That is when he saw her. A woman, pressed into the narrow space between the barrels and the wall, her body curled tight like something trying to disappear. Her dress was pale blue once, now stained dark with dirt and something worse. Her hair hung in matted tangles across her face. But through it, he could see her eyes, wide and animal, locked on him with the kind of terror that came from too many days of waiting to die. Tuari lowered the rifle slowly. He raised one hand, palm out, the way he would approach a wounded deer. "I will not hurt you," he said quietly in English. His accent was thick but clear. He had learned the white man's tongue from missionaries as a boy, before the wars. Before everything changed. The woman did not move, did not speak, just stared at him like he was another nightmare in a long line of them. Tuari crouched down, setting the rifle aside but keeping it within reach. That is when he saw the chains. Iron shackles around her ankles, bolted to a support beam sunk deep into the floor. The metal had rubbed her skin raw, crusted with dried blood and infection. The chains were short, barely long enough for her to shift position, let alone stand. Jesus and Mary. Tuari breathed, the English curse feeling strange in his mouth. He looked back toward the doorway, listening for footsteps. For any sign that Moss was nearby. Nothing. Just the wind moving through the gaps in the walls and the woman's shallow, frightened breathing. How long? He asked, turning back to her. She flinched at his voice, pressing harder against the wall. Tuari kept his movements slow, deliberate. How long have you been here? She swallowed. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then finally, a whisper so faint he almost missed it. I do not know. Her voice was hoarse, like she had screamed herself raw and then forgotten how to speak. Tuari's jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty before, had lived through it, had survived things that would break most men. But this, a woman chained in the dark like an animal, left to rot behind feed barrels while a trader conducted his business in the front room. This was something that made even his blood run cold. Where is the man who did this? Tuari asked. Moss, where is he? The woman's eyes darted toward the front of the building, then back to Tuari. He went to town. 2 days ago. Said he would be back before dark. 2 days. Which meant Moss had left her here without food, without water, chained in her own filth. Tuari stood slowly, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to put a bullet in Moss's head, wanted to make the man suffer the way this woman had suffered. But first, he needed to get her out. What is your name? He asked. She hesitated, as if she had forgotten that she had a name, that she was a person and not just a thing to be used and discarded. Then she whispered, Claire. Claire Donnelly. Claire, Tuari repeated. He nodded. My name is Tuari. I am going to get you out of here. Her eyes widened. No, you cannot. He will kill you. He will kill both of us. He is not here. He will come back. Then we will be gone before he does. Claire shook her head frantically, the chains rattling against the beam. You do not understand. He has done this before. He knows how to hunt. He will find us. He always finds them. Tuari went very still. Them? Claire's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dirt. There were others. I heard him talking to men who came through, bragging. He said I was the 4th one this year. A cold fury settled in Tuari's chest, the kind that did not burn hot but instead turned everything sharp and clear. He moved to the chains, examining the lock that held them to the beam. It was solid, built to last, but the wood of the beam was old and dry. He could see where the bolt had been driven in, the iron ring around it. I need tools, he said. Does he keep them here? Claire nodded toward a corner of the storeroom. There is a toolbox. Behind the crates. Tuari found it quickly, a battered wooden box filled with hammers, chisels, pliers, and a hacksaw. He pulled out the saw and returned to Claire. The blade was dull, but it would work. He knelt beside the beam and began sawing at the wood around the bolt, working the blade back and forth in short, steady strokes. The sound was loud in the enclosed space, metal scraping against wood. Claire watched him with wide eyes, her whole body trembling. He will hear, she whispered. When he comes back, he will hear and he will know. Let him hear, Tuari said. He did not stop sawing. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his arms burning with the effort, but he kept going. The wood began to splinter, thin cracks spreading out from the bolt. He worked faster, putting his weight behind each stroke. Minutes passed. The saw bit deeper, shaving away chunks of wood. Claire's breathing grew faster, more panicked. Please, she said. Please, you have to go. Before he comes back, I am not leaving you. You do not owe me anything. No, Tuari agreed. He paused, meeting her eyes. But I owe myself. I do not walk away from this. Claire stared at him, something shifting in her expression. Disbelief maybe, or hope, or both. She had been alone so long that the idea of someone helping her seemed impossible. But Tuari was here, and he was not leaving. The bolt gave way with a sharp crack. The iron ring pulled free from the beam, the chains suddenly loose. Claire gasped, pulling her legs toward her chest, the weight of the shackles still on her ankles but no longer tethering her to the floor. Tuari set the saw aside and reached for her. She flinched. He stopped, hands hovering in the air between them. "I will not hurt you," he said again. "But we need to move. Can you walk?" Claire looked down at her legs. The shackles were heavy, the skin beneath them torn and infected. She tried to shift her weight, then winced. "I do not know. We will find out," Tuari said. He stood and offered his hand. After a long moment, Claire reached out and took it. Her palm was cold and damp, her fingers trembling. Tuari pulled gently, helping her to her feet. She swayed, her legs nearly buckling, but he caught her, steadying her with a hand on her arm. "Slowly," he said. Claire took a step, dragging the chains behind her. Her face twisted with pain, but she did not fall. She took another step, then another, each one a little steadier than the last. By the time they reached the doorway, she was moving on her own, though Tuari kept close in case she faltered. They stepped into the main room of the trading post. The light from the front door was brighter now, the sun sinking toward the horizon. Tuari glanced outside, scanning the valley for any sign of movement. Nothing, just the empty expanse of red dirt and scrub brush, and the distant mesas glowing in the fading light. "We take supplies," Tuari said. He moved to the shelves, pulling down a canteen, dried meat, hardtack, a blanket. He stuffed them into a canvas sack, working quickly. Claire stood near the counter, watching him with a dazed expression, as if she could not quite believe this was happening. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Tuari looked at her. "Because it is right. That is not a reason. It is the only reason." He slung the sack over his shoulder and turned toward the door. Then he stopped, hoofbeats, faint, but growing louder. Coming from the south, the direction of town. Tuari's hand went to his rifle. He moved to the window and looked out through the dirty glass. A rider was approaching, still a half-mile out but closing fast. Even from this distance, Tuari could see the size of the man. Broad and heavy in the saddle, his horse laboring under the weight. "Ezekiel Moss, returning from town. He is coming," Claire whispered. Her voice was raw with panic. "We have to go." Now Tuari turned to her. "Can you ride?" She nodded, though her face was pale. "I can try. Then we go." He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. They stepped outside into the cooling air, and Tuari untied his Mare from the hitching post. The horse snorted, sensing the urgency. He tossed the sack across the saddle, then turned to help Claire mount. That is when he heard it. A shout, distant but clear. Moss had seen them. Tuari looked south and saw the rider kick his horse into a gallop, closing the distance fast. There was no time. He lifted Claire onto the Mare, her weight slight and fragile, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to grip the reins, and he kicked the horse hard. The Mare bolted forward, hooves pounding against the dirt. Behind them, the shout came again, closer now, followed by the crack of a rifle shot. The bullet whined past, too close. Tuari leaned low over Claire's shoulder, urging the Mare faster. The valley blurred around them, the mesas turning dark as the sun slipped below the horizon. Another shot. This one kicked up dirt to their left. Tuari did not look back. He focused on the terrain ahead, on the narrow canyon that opened up to the north, a place where the rocks would slow a pursuer and give them cover. The Mare's breathing was labored, her stride uneven under the double weight, but she ran. Driven by the urgency in Tuari's voice and the fear that radiated from Claire's trembling body. They reached the mouth of the canyon just as darkness fell. Tuari guided the Mare into the shadows, weaving between boulders and juniper trees. Behind them, he could hear Moss's horse, the hoofbeats echoing off the canyon walls. But the sound was growing fainter. The trader's mount was spent, unable to match the pace. Tuari pushed deeper into the canyon, following a path he had scouted on his way south. The rocks rose up on either side, narrowing into a passage barely wide enough for the horse. Claire was silent against him, her body rigid with pain and exhaustion. He could feel the heat of fever radiating from her skin. They rode for another hour, putting miles between themselves and the trading post. When Tuari finally stopped, it was in a sheltered alcove where a spring trickled down from the rocks above. He dismounted carefully, then helped Claire down. Her legs gave out the moment her feet touched the ground, and she collapsed into his arms. Tuari carried her to a flat section of rock and laid her down gently. She was shaking now, her teeth chattering despite the warmth of the evening. He retrieved the blanket from the sack and wrapped it around her, then knelt beside the spring and filled the canteen. When he brought it to her lips, she drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Rest," Tuari said. "We are safe here for now." Claire looked up at him, her eyes glassy with fever. "He will come," she whispered. "He will not stop. Then I will be ready." He stood and moved to the mouth of the alcove, his rifle in hand, and stared out into the darkness. Somewhere out there, Ezekiel Moss was hunting them. But Tuari had been hunted before, had spent his whole life running from men who wanted him dead. This time, though, he was not running alone. The night pressed down on them like a living thing. Tuari sat at the edge of the alcove, his back against cold stone, watching the canyon mouth for any flicker of movement. The moon had not yet risen, and the darkness was complete, broken only by the faint silver gleam of stars overhead. Behind him, he could hear Claire's labored breathing, the occasional whimper as fever dreams took hold of her. He had not built a fire, could not risk it. Moss would be searching, and smoke carried far in the desert night. Instead, Tuari rationed out strips of dried venison and hardtack, forcing himself to eat though his stomach was tight with tension. The Mare stood nearby, her reins tied loosely to a juniper branch, her head hanging low with exhaustion. She had given everything to get them here, and now she needed rest as much as Claire did. Tuari's thoughts drifted as he kept watch. He thought about the trading post, about the chains and the way Claire had looked at him with eyes that expected nothing but more pain. He thought about the women Moss had mentioned, the ones who came before. How many had died in that storeroom? How many had been buried in unmarked graves somewhere in this vast and different valley? The question sat heavy in his chest, unanswerable and bitter. A sound, faint, the skitter of loose rock somewhere down the canyon. Tuari's hand moved to his rifle, his finger resting against the trigger guard. He strained his ears, listening past the wind and the trickle of the spring. Nothing more. Maybe an animal, a fox or a coyote moving through the rocks. Or maybe Moss, closing in slowly, waiting for dawn to make his move. Hours passed. The moon finally rose, casting pale light across the canyon floor. Tuari could see better now, the shapes of boulders and twisted trees standing out against the shadows. He scanned the terrain methodically, looking for anything out of place. His eyes burned with fatigue, but he did not let them close. Sleep was a luxury he could not afford, not yet. Behind him, Claire stirred. He heard the rustle of the blanket, then a soft groan. Tuari turned his head slightly, keeping most of his attention on the canyon. "You are awake," he said quietly. Claire's voice came back weak and hoarse. "Water." Tuari retrieved the canteen and brought it to her. She struggled to sit up, her movements slow and pained. He helped her, one hand supporting her back while she drank. When she finished, she leaned heavily against the rock wall, her face ghastly pale in the moonlight. The fever had not broken. If anything, it seemed worse. "Your ankles," Tuari said, gesturing toward the shackles. I need to look at them. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Tuari knelt beside her and carefully lifted the hem of her dress. The shackles were still locked tight, the skin beneath them swollen and angry with infection. He could see yellow pus weeping from the wounds, smell the sickly sweet stench of rot. If they did not get those shackles off soon, if they did not clean and treat the infection, she would lose her feet. Or worse, I need to remove these, Tuari said. It will hurt. Everything hurts, Claire whispered. There was no self-pity in her voice, just a flat statement of fact. Tuari nodded. He moved back to the sack and pulled out the tools he had taken from the trading post. The hacksaw was still there, its blade dull and bent from cutting through the beam. It would have to do. He returned to Claire and positioned the blade against the iron shackle on her right ankle. Hold still, he said. Then he began to saw. The metal resisted, harder than the wood had been. Each stroke sent vibrations up Tuari's arms, the sound harsh and grating. Claire bit down on the edge of the blanket, her body rigid with pain as the blade scraped against her raw skin. It took 20 minutes to cut through the first shackle. When it finally snapped open, Claire let out a choked sob of relief. Blood trickled from the wound where the metal had been, dark and thick. Tuari set the shackle aside and moved to the second ankle. This one took even longer, the blade catching on a burr in the metal. By the time he finished, both of them were trembling with exhaustion. Tuari tore strips from the bottom of Claire's dress and soaked them in water from the spring. He cleaned the wounds as gently as he could, washing away the pus and dried blood. Claire hissed through her teeth, her hands clenched into fists, but she did not pull away. When he was done, he wrapped the strips around her ankles, binding them tight. It was not much, but it would have to be enough until they could find proper medicine. Thank you, Claire said softly. Tuari looked at her. You do not need to thank me. Yes, I do. Her eyes met his, clearer now despite the fever. You did not have to come back. You did not have to risk yourself for me. Most men would not have. Tuari was quiet for a moment. Then he said, most men are cowards. A faint smile touched Claire's lips, gone almost as soon as it appeared. She leaned her head back against the rock, her eyes drifting shut. What happens now? She asked. If Moss finds us, he will not. You cannot know that. I know these lands, Tuari said. I know how to disappear. And I know how to kill a man if I have to. Claire opened her eyes and studied him. You are Apache, yes, I have heard stories. About your people. About the wars. Most stories are lies. Are they? Tuari held her gaze. Some, not all. My people have done terrible things. But so have yours. War makes monsters of everyone. Claire did not argue. She just nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to her. Where will you take me? She asked. When we leave here, north, Tuari said. There's a settlement near the Gila River, a mission run by a priest named Father Esteban. He does not ask questions. He will help you. And you? Claire asked. What will you do? Tuari looked out at the canyon, at the vast darkness beyond. I do not know yet. They fell into silence after that. Tuari returned to his post at the alcove's edge, and Claire drifted back into fitful sleep. The night stretched on, cold and endless. Tuari's eyes grew heavy, his body demanding rest, but he forced himself to stay alert. Moss was out there somewhere, and the moment Tuari let his guard down would be the moment the traitor struck. Dawn came slowly, the sky lightening from black to deep blue to pale gold. Tuari watched the transformation, his body aching with fatigue. When the sun finally crested the canyon rim, spilling warm light across the rocks, he allowed himself to relax slightly. Moss had not come in the night, which meant he was either waiting for full daylight, or he had lost their trail. Tuari woke Claire gently. She blinked up at him, confused for a moment. Then awareness flooded back into her eyes. "We need to move," Tuari said. "Can you ride?" Claire pushed herself upright, wincing. "I will manage." He helped her to her feet and steadied her while she tested her weight on her bandaged ankles. She could walk, though each step clearly caused her pain. It would have to be enough. Tuari packed the remaining supplies, filled the canteen from the spring, and prepared the Mare. The horse was rested now, her eyes brighter, though Tuari could see the toll the previous day's flight had taken. They mounted together, Tuari in front this time so he could guide the horse more easily. Claire's arms wrapped around his waist, her grip weak but determined. Tuari turned the Mare north, following a narrow path that wound deeper into the canyon. The walls rose higher here, streaked with red and orange and ochre. The ancient stone carved by wind and water into strange flowing shapes. They rode for hours, stopping only briefly to rest the horse and let Claire drink. The sun climbed higher, turning the canyon into an oven. Sweat soaked through Tuari's shirt, and Claire's grip on him grew looser as the heat sapped what little strength she had left. He could feel her body slumping against his back, her head lolling forward. By midday, they emerged from the canyon into a wider valley. Tuari paused at the edge, scanning the open ground ahead. It was risky, leaving the cover of the rocks, but the detour around would add another day to their journey. And Claire did not have another day. The fever was getting worse, her skin burning hot even in the shade. Tuari made his decision. He urged the Mare forward into the valley, keeping to the low ground where scrub brush and creosote offered some concealment. The Mare's hooves kicked up small puffs of dust with each step, the sound loud in the stillness. Tuari's eyes moved constantly, watching for movement, for the glint of sunlight on metal, for anything that might signal danger. They were halfway across the valley when he saw it. A rider on the ridge to the east, silhouetted against the sky. Too far away to make out details, but Tuari knew. It was Moss. The trader sat motionless on his horse, watching them. Then slowly, deliberately, he started down the ridge. Tuari's jaw tightened. He kicked the Mare into a trot, then a canter. Claire gasped behind him, her arms tightening around his waist. "Hold on," Tuari said. The Mare surged forward, her hooves pounding against the hard-packed earth. Behind them, Moss was closing in, his horse fresher, faster. Tuari could hear the hoofbeats now, a steady thunder that seemed to shake the ground. A rifle shot cracked across the valley. The bullet whined past too close. Tuari veered left, guiding the Mare toward a cluster of boulders. Another shot. This one kicked up dirt, just ahead of them. The Mare shied, nearly stumbling, but Tuari held her steady. They reached the boulders and Tuari yanked the horse to a halt. Sliding down from the saddle, he pulled Claire down after him, half carrying her into the shelter of the rocks. She was barely conscious now, her eyes glazed and unfocused. Tuari propped her against a boulder and grabbed his rifle. He moved to the edge of the rocks and peered out. Moss was 200 yards away, dismounted now, using his own horse for cover. Tuari could see the glint of the rifle barrel resting across the saddle. The trader was taking his time, confident in his position. He had them pinned down, and he knew it. Tuari raised his own rifle and sighted down the barrel. The distance was long, but not impossible. He steadied his breathing, his finger curling around the trigger. Then he fired. The shot echoed across the valley, and Moss's horse reared. The trader stumbled back, losing his grip on his rifle. Tuari worked the lever, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a new round. He fired again. The shot went wide, but it was close enough to send Moss scrambling for better cover. The trader ducked behind a low rise, his rifle forgotten. Tuari allowed himself a grim smile. He had bought them time, but not much. Moss would regroup, would wait for Tuari to make a mistake. And mistakes in the desert were fatal. Tuari moved back to Claire. Her breathing was shallow, her lips cracked and bleeding. He lifted the canteen to her mouth and forced her to drink. "Claire," he said, "stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open. "I am sorry," she whispered, "for slowing you down." "You are not slowing me down. I am dying." "No." Tuari's voice was hard, unyielding. "You are not dying. I will not let you." Claire's hand reached up, her fingers brushing against his arm. "Why does it matter to you?"
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
She asked, "Why do you care?" Tuari looked at her, at this woman he had known for less than a day, this stranger who had become his responsibility. He thought about all the reasons he could give, about duty and honor and the simple human need to do what was right. But in the end, he just said, "Because I have lost too many people already." Claire's eyes held his for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Then I will try not to die," she said. "For you." Tuari squeezed her hand briefly, then stood and returned to his position. The sun was past its peak now, the shadows lengthening across the valley. Moss was still out there, waiting. Tuari could feel the weight of the man's presence, the cold certainty of his intent. The traitor would not give up. Men like that never did. Hours passed. The heat began to fade, replaced by the cooler air of evening. Tuari's throat was dry, his lips cracked. The canteen was nearly empty, and they had no food left. If they stayed here, they would die of thirst before Moss ever reached them. But if they tried to move, the traitor would pick them off the moment they broke cover. Tuari made his choice. When the sun finally touched the western horizon, when the long shadows merged into twilight, he woke Claire. "We move now," he said. "While we still have light." Claire nodded weakly. Tuari helped her onto the Mare, then swung up behind her. He took one last look at the valley, at the place where Moss waited in the darkness. Then he turned the Mare west, away from the traitor, away from the path north. It was a gamble, a desperate bid to lose Moss in the maze of canyons and dry washes that stretched toward the setting sun. The Mare moved slowly, her strength nearly spent. Tuari guided her carefully, avoiding loose rocks and treacherous footing. Behind them, he heard a shout. Moss had seen them. The race had begun again, but this time, Tuari was not running blind. He knew this country, had traveled it before. There was a place ahead, a narrow gorge where the walls closed in tight, and the trail became a thread of stone barely wide enough for a horse. If they could reach it before Moss caught up, if they could make it through to the other side, they would have a chance. The Mare stumbled, catching herself at the last moment. Claire gasped, her grip tightening around Tuari's waist. He urged the horse forward, every muscle in his body coiled with tension. The gorge was close now. He could see the dark opening in the rocks ahead. Just a little further, they plunged into the gorge as the last light faded from the sky. The walls rose up on either side, blocking out the stars. Tuari could barely see, guiding the Mare more by feel than sight. Behind them, the sound of hoofbeats echoed off the stone. Closer now, too close, and then the walls opened up and they were through. Tuari kicked the Mare into a gallop, racing across open ground toward a line of cottonwoods in the distance. Water. There would be water there. And cover, and a chance to rest. The Mare gave everything she had left, her sides heaving, foam flecking her lips. They reached the trees just as full darkness fell. Tuari dismounted and pulled Claire down, carrying her to the bank of a narrow stream. He laid her in the cool water, letting it wash over her burning skin. She gasped at the shock of it, her eyes flying open. "We made it," Tuari said. "We are safe." Claire looked up at him, water streaming down her face. "For how long?" she asked. Tuari did not answer, because he did not know. The cottonwoods offered shelter from the wind, but not from the cold that settled over the desert once the sun disappeared. Tuari built a small fire, shielded by rocks and kept low so the flames would not be visible from a distance. He could not risk going another night without warmth, not with Claire's fever raging and her body already pushed beyond its limits. The gamble was calculated. Moss would have lost their trail in the darkness of the gorge. And by the time he picked it up again at first light, they would be gone. Claire lay wrapped in the blanket near the fire. Her eyes closed, but her breathing still labored and uneven. Tuari had stripped away the makeshift bandages on her ankles and washed the wounds again in the stream. The infection was worse than he had hoped, the flesh hot and swollen, streaks of red radiating up her calves. He had seen wounds like this before, had watched strong men die from them when the poison spread too far through the blood. Claire did not have much time. He crushed juniper berries between 2 stones, mixing them with water to make a paste. It was not proper medicine, but it might slow the infection enough to buy her another day. Tuari applied the paste carefully, working it into the wounds despite Claire's whimpers of pain. When he finished, he tore fresh strips from his own shirt and bound her ankles again, pulling the fabric tight. "Will it help?" Claire asked weakly, her eyes half open. Tuari looked at her. "It will help, you are lying." He did not deny it. Instead, he said, "It will help enough." Claire closed her eyes again. "I heard a story once," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "about a man who tried to outrun death. He ran for days, across deserts and mountains, but death was always behind him. In the end, he collapsed from exhaustion, and death caught up to him. The man asked why death had chased him so far. Death said, 'I was not chasing you. I was simply going where I knew you would end up.'" Tuari stirred the fire with a stick, sending sparks drifting up into the darkness. "That is a sad story. It is a true story," Claire said. "Everyone ends up in the same place eventually. Not tonight," Tuari said firmly. "Tonight you are here, by this fire, alive. That is all that matters." Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell me about yourself. About where you come from." Tuari hesitated. He was not accustomed to sharing his past, especially not with white people who saw Apaches as savages and nothing more. But Claire was not like the others. She had looked at him without fear, without hatred, only with the desperate hope of someone who had been drowning and finally found something solid to hold on to. "I was born in the mountains," he began slowly. "In the land the white men call Arizona, but my people call home. My father was a warrior, my mother was a healer. I had 2 brothers and a sister. We lived the way our ancestors lived, following the seasons, hunting, gathering, moving with the deer and the antelope. What happened to them?" Claire asked. Tuari's jaw tightened. "The soldiers came. I was 16. They said we had to leave our land, go to a reservation where we would be fed and protected. My father refused. He said we were free people, that no one could tell us where to live. The soldiers did not care. They burned our camp, killed anyone who resisted. My father died fighting. My mother and sister were shot trying to run. My brothers and I escaped into the mountains." Claire's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I am sorry. Everyone is sorry," Tuari said. "But sorry does not bring back the dead." "No," Claire agreed. "It does not." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Then Claire spoke again, her voice stronger now despite the fever. "I was married once. His name was Patrick. We came west on a wagon train, looking for land, for a new start. He was a good man, kind and gentle. He made me laugh even when things were hard." "What happened to him?" Tuari asked. Claire's face twisted with grief. "Cholera. It swept through the wagon train like wildfire. We lost 12 people in 2 weeks. Patrick was strong. I thought he would survive. But the sickness does not care about strength. He died in my arms, delirious with fever, calling for his mother. Tuari said nothing. There was nothing to say. They had both lost everything, had both been shaped by violence and grief into something harder than they had been before. The difference was that Tuari had learned to live with it, while Claire was still struggling to find her footing after Patrick died. The wagon master told me I could not stay with the train unless I remarried or found work. Claire continued. There was a man, a trader, who offered to take me on as a cook. I was desperate, so I agreed. But when we stopped at Moss's trading post to resupply, the trader left me there. So Moss would give me work. I did not know until it was too late that work meant chains and darkness and waiting to die. Tuari felt the anger rise in him again, cold and sharp. How long were you there before I came? He asked. Claire thought for a moment. 3 months. Maybe 4. Time stopped meaning anything after a while. There were days I prayed for death, for anything to end it. And then you walked through that door. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. I thought you were another customer at first. Another man come to use me and leave. But you were different. You saw me as a person, not a thing. I do not think you know how rare that is. Tuari did know. He had spent his entire life being seen as less than human, as a problem to be solved or an obstacle to be removed. The fact that he extended the same humanity to Claire that had been denied to him was not kindness. It was simply the right thing to do. But he did not say this. Instead, he stood and added more wood to the fire. You should sleep, he said. We leave before dawn. Where are we going? Claire asked. The mission, Tuari said. It is still 2 days north. Father Esteban will have medicine, real medicine. He will help you. And Moss? Claire's voice was tight with fear. What about him? Tuari looked out into the darkness beyond the firelight. I will deal with Moss. You cannot fight him alone. I have fought worse men than him. That does not mean you will win. Tuari turned back to her. Would you rather I leave you? He asked. Ride north alone and hope he does not find you? Claire shook her head quickly. No, I do not want you to die because of me. I will not die, Tuari said. And neither will you. Now sleep. Claire nodded reluctantly and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out, though Tuari could still see the tremors that ran through her body as the fever burned. He settled himself against a tree, his rifle across his knees, and kept watch. The night was alive with sounds, the rustle of small animals in the brush, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through the cottonwood leaves. Tuari listened to all of it, his senses attuned to anything that did not belong. Hours passed. The moon rose high and then began its descent toward the western horizon. Tuari's eyes grew heavy, but he forced them to stay open. He thought about the journey ahead, about the mission and Father Esteban. The priest was an old man now, stooped and gray, but he had been one of the few white men who treated Apaches with respect. He ran his mission as a sanctuary, a place where anyone could find food and shelter, regardless of who they were or what they had done. Tuari had brought wounded warriors there before, men the army would have hanged if they had been caught. Father Esteban had asked no questions, had simply tended their wounds and sent them on their way. A sound jolted Tuari from his thoughts. A horse, nickering softly somewhere in the darkness. Not his Mare, she was tied nearby and quiet. This was a different animal, and it was close. Tuari's hand tightened on his rifle. He rose silently to his feet, moving away from the fire so his eyes could adjust to the darkness. He scanned the trees, the shadows, looking for movement. There, a shape barely visible between 2 cottonwoods. A man on horseback, sitting perfectly still, watching the camp. Tuari raised his rifle slowly, sighting down the barrel. But before he could fire, the rider spurred his horse and vanished into the night. Tuari cursed under his breath. Moss had found them. He moved quickly back to the fire and kicked dirt over the flames, plunging the camp into darkness. Claire woke with a start, her eyes wide and frightened. "What is it?" she whispered. "Moss," Tuari said. "He is here. We need to move now, but it is still dark. That is why we move now." Tuari gathered their few belongings, stuffing them into the sack with quick, efficient movements. He helped Claire to her feet, her body swaying with weakness. The Mare was already nervous, sensing the danger. Tuari untied her and led her to a fallen log where Claire could mount more easily. He lifted her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. They moved through the cottonwoods slowly, Tuari guiding the Mare by memory more than sight. The darkness was complete under the canopy of leaves, the moonlight blocked out. Every sound seemed amplified, the creak of leather, the snap of a twig under the Mare's hooves. Tuari's heart pounded in his chest, his eyes straining to see through the blackness. They emerged from the trees onto open ground. Tuari turned the Mare north and kicked her into a trot. Behind them, he heard a shout, then the thunder of hoofbeats. Moss was coming, and this time there would be no losing him in the dark. The chase was on. The Mare ran hard, her breath coming in great gasps. Claire clung to Tuari, her body limp with exhaustion. The ground was treacherous in the darkness, full of hidden rocks and gopher holes that could snap a horse's leg in an instant. But Tuari had no choice. He pushed the Mare harder, urging her forward with voice and heel. A rifle shot cracked through the night. The bullet sang past, so close Tuari felt the wind of its passage. He veered left, then right, weaving an unpredictable pattern. Another shot, then another. Moss was firing blind, hoping to get lucky. But the darkness that hindered the traitor also protected Tuari and Claire. They crested a low ridge and plunged down the far side. The Mare's hooves skidded on loose gravel, and for a terrifying moment, Tuari thought they would fall. But the Mare caught herself and kept running, her instincts overriding her exhaustion. At the bottom of the ridge, Tuari turned hard to the east, doubling back on their trail. It was a risky move, but it might confuse Moss, buy them a few precious minutes. The sound of pursuit faded behind them. Tuari did not slow. He kept the Mare moving at a steady pace, eating up the miles. The sky began to lighten in the east, the stars fading one by one. By the time the sun broke over the horizon, they were miles away from the cottonwood grove, heading north across a wide, flat plain dotted with sagebrush and yucca. Tuari finally allowed the Mare to slow to a walk. The horse was spent, her sides heaving, white foam dripping from her mouth. Tuari knew he was asking too much of her, but there was no alternative. If they stopped, if they rested, Moss would catch them. And this time, there would be no escape. Claire had fallen unconscious again, her body a dead weight against Tuari's chest. He could feel the heat radiating from her, even through their clothes. The fever was winning. Tuari looked north, toward the distant mountains where the mission lay hidden in a green valley. It was still a day's ride, maybe more at this pace. He did not know if Claire would last that long. The sun climbed higher, turning the plain into a furnace. Tuari's throat was parched, his lips cracked and bleeding. The canteen was empty, drained during the night. He scanned the horizon for any sign of water, but there was nothing. Just endless miles of dry earth and scrub brush baking under the merciless sun. By midday, the Mare was stumbling. Tuari knew he had to stop, had to let her rest even if it meant giving Moss a chance to close the distance. He guided the horse toward a cluster of rocks that offered a small patch of shade. When they reached it, Tuari dismounted carefully and lifted Claire down. She did not wake, even when he laid her in the shade and wet her lips with the last few drops from the canteen. Tuari checked the Mare. Her breathing was labored, her eyes dull. She had given everything and had nothing left to give. Tuari ran his hand along her neck, feeling the tremors that ran through her muscles. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am asking too much of you." The Mare lowered her head, too exhausted even to acknowledge him. Tuari unsaddled her and let her stand free, hoping the rest would revive her enough to continue. Then he returned to Claire and sat beside her, his back against the rocks. He was so tired he could barely think, his body screaming for sleep. But he could not afford to close his eyes, not even for a moment. He must have dozed off anyway, because when he opened his eyes the sun had moved across the sky and the shadows had shifted. Tuari jerked upright, his hand going to his rifle. He scanned the plain frantically, looking for moss. Nothing. The land stretched out empty and silent in every direction. Claire stirred beside him. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Tuari," she whispered. "I am here," he said, leaning close. "Patrick," Claire said. "I see Patrick." "He is calling me." "No," Tuari said sharply. "You do not see him. You have a fever. It is making you see things that are not real." "He looks so happy," Claire continued, as if she had not heard him. "He wants me to come with him. Should I go?" Tuari gripped her shoulders. "Claire, listen to me. Patrick is dead. You are alive. You stay alive. Do you understand?" Claire's eyes focused on him for a moment, a flicker of awareness cutting through the delirium. "I am so tired," she said. "I know," Tuari said. "But you must hold on a little longer. We are close now. Just a little longer." Claire's eyes drifted shut again. Tuari released her shoulders and stood, frustration and fear warring inside him. He looked at the Mare. The horse had not moved, was still standing with her head down, sides heaving. They could not continue. Not like this. But staying here meant death, either from thirst or from Moss's rifle. Tuari made a decision. He would leave the Mare and carry Claire. It would be slower, much slower, but it was their only chance. He bent down and gathered Claire into his arms, lifting her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing, her body wasted by weeks of captivity and days of fever. Tuari settled her weight against his chest and began to walk north. The sun beat down on him mercilessly. Each step was an effort, his legs trembling with exhaustion. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. He lost track of time, focused only on putting one foot in front of the other. The mountains seemed to grow no closer, no matter how far he walked. It was as if he were trapped in a nightmare, doomed to walk forever toward a destination he would never reach. And then, just when he thought he could not take another step, he saw it. A thin line of green cutting across the plain. Trees, which meant water. Tuari staggered toward it, his vision swimming. He reached the edge of a shallow creek and collapsed to his knees, laying Claire gently on the bank. He scooped up water in his hands and drank deeply, the cool liquid like a benediction. Then he wet Claire's face and lips, trying to wake her. She did not respond. Tuari felt for a pulse at her throat and found it, weak and thready but still there. He lifted her head and tried to get her to drink, but the water just ran out of her mouth. Panic clawed at him. She was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. A voice spoke from behind him. "You have come a long way, my son." Tuari spun around, his hand going to his knife. But the man standing there was not Moss. He was old, with skin like weathered leather and eyes that held both sorrow and kindness. He wore the simple brown robes of a Franciscan monk. "Father Esteban, help her," Tuari said, his voice breaking. "Please." The priest moved forward and knelt beside Claire. He placed a hand on her forehead, then examined her ankles. His expression grew grave. "Bring her," he said. "The mission is close. We must hurry." Tuari lifted Claire again and followed Father Esteban through the trees. Within minutes, they emerged into a small valley where a adobe mission stood surrounded by fields and gardens. The priest led him inside to a cool, dim room where a simple bed waited. Tuari laid Claire down, and Father Esteban immediately began to work, calling for water and medicines and clean cloth. Tuari stepped back, his legs finally giving out. He sank to the floor against the wall and watched as the priest tended to Claire with practiced efficiency. And for the first time since he had found her chained in that storeroom, Tuari allowed himself to hope that she might actually survive. The mission smelled of herbs and candle wax and the faint sweetness of incense that clung to the adobe walls like memory. Tuari sat in the corner of the small room, watching Father Esteban work over Claire's unconscious form with the precision of a man who had seen too much suffering to be rattled by it. The priest's hands moved with surprising speed for someone so old, cleaning the infected wounds on her ankles with solutions that smelled sharp and medicinal, applying poultices made from plants Tuari did not recognize, wrapping everything in clean white bandages that seemed impossibly bright against Claire's gray skin. Two younger priests assisted Father Esteban, their movements quiet and efficient. One held a basin of steaming water while the other prepared tonics and tinctures from bottles lined up on a wooden shelf. No one spoke except to issue brief instructions. The only sounds were Claire's labored breathing and the soft splash of water being wrung from cloth. Tuari's eyes burned with exhaustion, but he could not look away. He had carried her so far, had pushed himself and the Mare beyond all reasonable limits to get her here. Now that they had arrived, now that her fate was in someone else's hands, he felt strangely untethered. For 3 days his entire world had narrowed to a single purpose. Keep Claire alive, keep moving, stay ahead of Moss. Without that driving focus, the weight of everything he had done and everything he had risked settled over him like a physical burden. Father Esteban finally straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. He turned to Tuari and gestured toward the door. "Come," he said quietly. "Let her rest. We must talk." Tuari rose stiffly, his body protesting every movement. He followed the priest out into the mission's central courtyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A fountain burbled in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by flowering plants that filled the air with perfume. It was peaceful here, almost unbearably so after the violence and desperation of the past days. Father Esteban sat on a stone bench near the fountain and motioned for Tuari to join him. When Tuari did, the priest studied him with those knowing eyes. "You look like a man who has been running from the devil himself," Father Esteban said. "Not running from," Tuari replied. "Running with. I have the devil's prize, and he wants her back." The priest nodded slowly. "Tell me everything," so Tuari did. He told Father Esteban about going to the trading post to exchange his Mare for supplies, about finding Claire chained in the storeroom, about Moss and the chase across the desert. He left nothing out, not the violence, not the close calls, not his own fear that he would fail and Claire would die because of it. When he finished, the priest was quiet for a long time. "Ezekiel Moss," Father Esteban said finally. "I know the name. He came here once, several years ago, seeking supplies. I did not trust him then, and I trust him less now knowing what you have told me. Men like that are a cancer on the land, spreading suffering wherever they go. He will come here," Tuari said. "When he figures out where we went, he will come. Let him," Father Esteban replied calmly. "This is sacred ground. Even men like Moss hesitate to bring violence to the house of God." Tuari shook his head. "You do not know him. He does not care about God or sacred ground. He cares about what he thinks belongs to him. Then we will deal with him if he arrives," the priest said. "But first, you must eat and rest. You are no good to anyone in your current condition." As if on cue, one of the younger priests appeared carrying a tray laden with food, bread and cheese and dried fruit, along with a cup of water. Tuari realized he had not eaten since the hardtack 2 days ago. He took the tray with a nod of thanks and ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. His body needed the fuel. But his mind was elsewhere, still on Claire. Still on Moss, somewhere out there in the darkness, when he finished eating. Father Esteban showed him to a small cell with a narrow bed and a single window that looked out over the valley. "Sleep," the priest said. "I will watch over the woman. If there is any change, I will wake you." Tuari wanted to argue, wanted to stay by Claire's side, but exhaustion was pulling at him like an undertow. He nodded and entered the cell. The moment he lay down on the bed, sleep claimed him, deep and dreamless. He woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of bells ringing. For a moment he was disoriented, unsure where he was. Then memory flooded back. He sat up quickly, wincing at the stiffness in his muscles. How long had he slept? The angle of the sun suggested it was mid-morning, which meant he had been unconscious for at least 12 hours. Tuari left the cell and made his way back to the room where Claire lay. Father Esteban was there, sitting in a chair beside the bed, reading from a small leather-bound book.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
He looked up when Tuari entered. "She woke twice during the night," the priest said. "Briefly. The fever has not broken, but it has not worsened either." "That is something." Tuari approached the bed and looked down at Claire. Her face was still pale, still drawn with pain, but there was a subtle difference in the set of her features. The desperate, haunted look had faded slightly, replaced by something closer to simple exhaustion. Her breathing was easier, less labored. The bandages on her ankles were clean and white, no sign of blood seeping through. "Thank you," Tuari said to the priest. "For helping her." Father Esteban closed his book. "I help all who come to me in need. That is my calling. But I think perhaps you are the one who saved her life. Not I another day in those chains, another day of fever without treatment, and she would be beyond anyone's help." Tuari said nothing. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Father Esteban watched him for a moment, then stood. "I will bring you breakfast," he said, "and I will send word to the surrounding settlements. If Moss is searching for you, we should know where he is." The day passed slowly. Tuari kept his vigil beside Claire's bed, leaving only when necessary. She woke several more times, each time a little more coherent than the last. The first time, she did not seem to recognize where she was or who Tuari was. The second time, she asked for water and drank deeply when he held the cup to her lips. The third time, her eyes focused on his face and she whispered, "We made it." "Yes," Tuari said. "We made it." By evening, the fever had broken. Claire woke fully, her eyes clear for the first time since Tuari had found her. She looked around the room, taking in the whitewashed walls, the simple wooden cross hanging above the bed, the smell of herbs and clean linen. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice hoarse but strong. "A mission," Tuari said. "Father Esteban's mission. You are safe here." Claire closed her eyes, relief washing over her face. When she opened them again, there were tears. "I thought I was going to die," she said. "In the desert, when the fever was so bad, I thought that was the end." "You are stronger than you think," Tuari said. "No," Claire said quietly. "You are stronger than I think. You carried me when I could not walk. You fought for me when I had given up fighting for myself. I owe you my life." Tuari was uncomfortable with gratitude. He shifted in his chair. "You owe me nothing. That is not true," Claire said. She reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I owe you everything. And I do not even know why you did it. Why you risked so much for a stranger." Tuari looked down at their joined hands. He thought about how to answer, about all the complicated reasons that had driven him to act. But in the end, he settled on the simplest truth. Because no one should be left in chains. Claire's eyes searched his face. "You have been in chains," she said. It was not a question. "Not like yours," Tuari said. But yes, my people have been in chains for a long time. Some are iron, some are invisible, but they all bind just the same. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared understanding passing between them. Then Claire spoke again. What happens now? When I am well enough to leave? Tuari had been thinking about that question since they arrived at the mission. That depends on what you want, he said. Father Esteban can help you find passage to a settlement, maybe even back east if that is where you want to go. Or you can stay here and work at the mission. He always needs help, and you? Claire asked. What will you do? Tuari released her hand and stood, moving to the window. The valley spread out below, green and peaceful in the fading light. I do not know yet, he admitted. I came south to trade for supplies. That seems like a lifetime ago now. Will you go back to your people? Claire asked. Tuari shook his head. I have no people anymore. The ones who survived the wars are scattered across the territories, hiding in the mountains or trapped on reservations. I move alone now. It is safer that way. Safer for who? Claire asked. For everyone, Tuari said. He turned back to face her. Apache men are hunted. Sometimes by soldiers, sometimes by bounty hunters, sometimes just by settlers looking for revenge. If I am with others, I put them in danger. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That sounds lonely. It is, Tuari admitted. But it is the way things are. Over the next 3 days, Claire's strength returned slowly but steadily. Father Esteban's medicines and poultices worked their magic, drawing out the infection and allowing the wounds to begin healing. Claire was able to sit up on the 2nd day, to stand with help on the 3rd. The color returned to her face, and with it, glimpses of the woman she must have been before moss destroyed her. Tuari spent most of his time in the courtyard or walking the perimeter of the mission grounds. He was restless, unable to settle despite the peace that surrounded him. Part of it was worry about Moss. The traitor had not appeared, but that did not mean he had given up. Part of it was something else, a growing awareness that his time with Claire was temporary. That soon she would be well enough to leave and he would have to decide what came next. On the 4th day, Father Esteban found Tuari sitting by the fountain and joined him on the bench. She is recovering well, the priest said. Another week and she will be fully mobile. The scars will remain, but the infection is gone. Good, Tuari said. Father Esteban studied him. You are troubled, my son. I can see it in your eyes. Tuari did not deny it. I keep waiting for Moss to appear. Every time I hear horses approaching, I reach for my rifle. Perhaps he has given up, Father Esteban suggested. Perhaps he decided she was not worth the trouble. Men like Moss do not give up, Tuari said. They cannot. Their pride will not allow it, the priest nodded slowly. Then we must be vigilant. But we cannot live in fear. That is letting him win even if he never arrives. That evening, as Tuari sat with Claire in her room, she asked him to tell her more about his life before the wars. He was reluctant at first, unused to sharing such personal things. But something about Claire's open, earnest expression made him want to talk. So he told her about his childhood in the mountains, about learning to track and hunt from his father, about the long summers when the whole band would gather for celebrations and ceremonies. He told her about his mother's healing knowledge, passed down through generations, and about his sister's laugh that could make even the sternest warrior smile. Claire listened intently, asking questions that showed she was truly interested, not just being polite. When Tuari finished, she said, "It sounds beautiful. The life you had before, it was," Tuari said. "But it is gone now." "Not entirely," Claire said. "You still carry it with you. In the way you move through the world, in the things you know, in the choices you make. That cannot be taken away." Tuari considered this. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps some part of that old life did remain, even if the physical world that contained it had been destroyed. The thought was oddly comforting. What about you? Tuari asked. What will you do when you leave here? Claire looked down at her bandaged ankles. I do not know. I have no money, no family. Patrick's dream of finding land died with him. I suppose I could find work in a settlement somewhere, cooking or cleaning. But the thought of it, of just surviving day to day with no purpose, no future, it feels empty. You could stay here, Tuari suggested. At the mission. Father Esteban would welcome the help, Claire smiled sadly. Maybe, or maybe I should go back east. Try to start over somewhere that does not hold so many bad memories. They were both quiet for a moment, each lost in thoughts of uncertain futures. Then Claire said, Can I ask you something? Tuari nodded. Why did you really do it? I know what you said about chains and freedom. But there must be more to it than that. You risked everything for me. Your life, your safety. Why? Tuari was quiet for a long time, searching for words to explain something he did not fully understand himself. Finally he said, When I found you in that storeroom, I saw myself. Not literally, but the feeling. The helplessness. The certainty that no one was coming, that this was how it ended. I have felt that way before, when the soldiers came, when I watched my family die. And I swore then that if I ever had the chance to save someone from feeling that way, I would take it. No matter the cost. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. For seeing me. For caring. Tuari reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. You would have done the same. I would like to think so, Claire said. But I am not sure I am that brave. You are braver than you know, Tuari said. You survived 4 months of hell and came out the other side still human. That takes more courage than anything I did. That night, Tuari could not sleep. He walked the mission grounds under the stars, his rifle in hand, watching and listening. The night was cool and clear, the kind of night that made a man feel small and insignificant against the vastness of the sky. Somewhere out there, Moss was either still searching or had given up and moved on. Tuari did not know which possibility disturbed him more. He was standing by the mission's front gate when he heard it. Hoofbeats, coming from the south, moving at a steady pace. Tuari's hand tightened on his rifle. He moved into the shadows beside the gate and waited. The rider came closer, taking shape in the moonlight. A single man on a tired horse, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had been riding for days. The rider stopped just outside the gate. In the moonlight, Tuari could see his face. It was not Moss. This man was younger, leaner, with a nervous energy that radiated from him even sitting still. He called out, Hello. Anyone there? I am looking for Father Esteban. Tuari stepped out of the shadows, his rifle raised but not aimed. State your business, the rider startled, his hand going to the pistol at his hip. But when he saw Tuari's face, he relaxed slightly. I have news. About a trader named Ezekiel Moss. Father Esteban sent word to the settlements asking if anyone had seen him. I have information. Tuari lowered the rifle. Tell me, the rider dismounted, keeping his hands visible. Moss rode into the town of Copper Ridge 3 days ago. He was asking about an Apache man and a white woman, offering money for information. No one told him anything, but word is he is putting together a group. Men willing to ride with him for a share of whatever he is after. Tuari's blood ran cold. Moss was not giving up. He was escalating. How many men? Tuari asked. The rider shrugged. 4, maybe 5. All hard types. The kind who do not ask questions as long as the pay is good. When did they leave Copper Ridge? Tuari asked. Yesterday morning, the rider said. Heading north. Following rumors of a mission in the valley, which meant they would arrive here within a day, maybe 2 at most. Tuari turned and ran back toward the mission, leaving the rider standing by his horse, looking confused. He found Father Esteban in his small office, writing by candlelight. The priest looked up as Tuari burst in. "Moss is coming," Tuari said. "With men. We have 2 days, maybe less." Father Esteban set down his pen carefully. "Then we prepare," he said calmly. "This mission has weathered storms before. It will weather this one." Father Esteban moved with surprising speed for a man of his years. Within an hour of receiving the news, he'd assembled everyone at the mission in the courtyard. 4 younger priests, 2 elderly women who helped with cooking and laundry, and a handful of travelers who had sought shelter for the night. The priest stood beside the fountain, his weathered face grave in the torchlight, and explained the situation with calm directness. "A dangerous man is coming here with armed companions," Father Esteban said. "He seeks to reclaim a woman who escaped his captivity. We will not surrender her. This mission has always been a sanctuary for those fleeing violence and persecution, and that will not change now. However, I will not ask anyone to risk their lives if they do not wish to. Those who want to leave may do so with my blessing and enough supplies to reach the next settlement." No one moved. The 2 elderly women exchanged glances. Then one of them, a tough-looking Mexican woman with silver hair, spoke up. "We stay, Padre. This is our home. We do not run from bullies." The younger priests nodded in agreement. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Brother Miguel, who had been a soldier before taking his vows, said, "We have some weapons. Old hunting rifles, nothing fancy. But we know how to use them." Father Esteban looked at each person in turn, then nodded. "Very well. Then we prepare. Tuari, you have fought before. What do we need to do?" Tuari stepped forward. He had been thinking about this since leaving the rider at the gate. The mission's walls were adobe, thick and solid, but the gate was wood and would not hold against determined men. The building itself was defensible, with narrow windows and heavy doors, but there were too many approaches, too many ways for attackers to gain entry. "We cannot hold the entire mission," Tuari said. "There are too few of us. We need to choose a strong position and make our stand there. The chapel, I think. It has only 2 entrances, both with heavy doors. The windows are high and narrow. If we barricade ourselves inside, they will have to come to us." Father Esteban considered this. "The chapel it is. Brother Miguel, gather whatever weapons we have. Brother Thomas, bring all the food and water we can carry into the chapel. We may be there for some time. Sister Rosa, Sister Maria, prepare medical supplies. There will be wounded before this is over." The group dispersed to their tasks. Tuari found Claire in her room, sitting on the edge of the bed, her face pale but determined. She had heard the commotion and somehow sensed what it meant. "He is coming, is he not?" she asked. "Yes," Tuari said. "With others. We have a day, maybe 2. Claire stood slowly, testing her weight on her healing ankles. She winced but did not fall. "Then I need to be ready. I will not hide while others fight for me." "You are not strong enough," Tuari said. "I am strong enough to load a rifle," Claire replied. "I am strong enough to stand and shoot." "That will have to be enough," Tuari wanted to argue, to insist that she stay hidden and safe. But he saw the steel in her eyes, the determination that had allowed her to survive 4 months of captivity. She would not be deterred. "All right," he said. "But you stay in the center of the chapel, away from the doors and windows. You are our last line of defense," Claire nodded. Agreed. They spent the rest of the night and all the next day preparing. Brother Miguel produced 5 old rifles, their mechanisms worn but functional, along with 2 pistols and enough ammunition to sustain a prolonged fight. Tuari cleaned and checked each weapon personally, showing the priests how to load and fire them. Most had never held a gun before, and their hands trembled as they practiced the motions. But fear could be overcome with repetition, and by evening they were at least competent. The chapel was transformed into a fortress. Heavy wooden benches were dragged in front of the doors, creating makeshift barricades. Supplies were stacked in the back near the altar, water barrels and sacks of grain and dried meat, enough to last a week if rationed carefully. The elderly women set up a medical station with clean cloth for bandages, whiskey for disinfecting wounds, and needles and thread for sutures. It was grim work, preparing for violence in a house of God. But no one complained. Tuari positioned himself near one of the chapel's front windows, a narrow opening about 6 feet off the ground that provided a clear view of the courtyard and gate. He had chosen this spot because it offered the best vantage point for spotting approaching riders while providing cover from return fire. Brother Miguel took the other front window, while the remaining priests spread out to cover the side entrances. Claire sat near the altar, a loaded rifle across her lap, her face set in lines of quiet determination. The sun set, plunging the valley into darkness. Tuari allowed no lights in the chapel, fearing they would make easy targets through the windows. Instead, they sat in the dark and waited. Hours crawled by. Tuari's eyes adjusted until he could make out shapes in the courtyard. The fountain, the scattered plants, the gate that led to the outside world. Midnight came and went. Some of the priests dozed at their posts, exhaustion overcoming fear. Tuari remained alert, his senses heightened by years of surviving in hostile territory. He could feel something building in the darkness, a pressure like the air before a storm. They were coming. He knew it with the certainty of prey recognizing a predator's approach. Dawn broke gray and cold. Mist hung low over the valley, obscuring the distance. Tuari strained his eyes, searching for movement. Then he saw them. 5 riders emerging from the mist like ghosts, moving slowly toward the mission. They stopped about 200 yards out, just beyond effective rifle range, and sat their horses in a line. Even from this distance, Tuari recognized the figure in the center. Moss, larger than the others, sitting heavy in his saddle. "They are here," Tuari called quietly. The priests jerked awake, scrambling to their positions. Father Esteban appeared at Tuari's shoulder, peering out the window. 5 men, the priest observed. "As we were told. 5 men is enough," Tuari said. "If they know what they are doing." One of the riders separated from the group and walked his horse forward slowly, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. When he was close enough, he called out, "We mean no harm to the mission or its people. We are looking for a woman who was stolen from her rightful place. A woman named Claire Donnelly. Return her to us, and we will leave in peace." Father Esteban moved to the chapel door and called back through the heavy wood. "There is no stolen woman here. Only a woman who sought sanctuary from violence. She is under the protection of this mission and the protection of God. You will not have her." The rider sat silent for a moment, then turned and rode back to the others. Tuari watched as the 5 men conferred, their voices too low to hear. Then Moss himself rode forward, stopping where the first rider had been. His voice, when it came, was cold and flat. "Father, I am a reasonable man. But that woman belongs to me. I paid good money for her, and I aim to get my property back. You are harboring a thief and a runaway. The law would be on my side if we brought the law into this. But I would prefer to settle it peaceable. Send her out, and no one gets hurt. The woman is not property," Father Esteban called back. "She is a human being with rights given by God. You will not have her." Moss was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are making a mistake, Padre, a mistake that will cost lives. I will give you 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we come in and take what is ours." He turned his horse and rode back to the others. The 5 men dismounted and began to set up a camp just outside rifle range, building a small fire and settling in with the casual confidence of men who had done this before. They were not in a hurry. They knew the mission's defenders were trapped, knew that time was on their side. Tuari pulled back from the window and turned to Father Esteban. He will not wait an hour. That is just talk to make us nervous, to give us time to doubt ourselves. He will attack soon, probably from multiple directions at once. Then we will be ready, the priest said. He raised his voice so everyone in the chapel could hear. We stand together. We do not give in to evil men who traffic in human suffering. Whatever comes, we face it with courage and faith. The priests murmured their agreement, though Tuari could see the fear in their faces. They were not warriors. They were men of peace thrust into a situation that demanded violence. But they would fight because they believed in something larger than themselves. Tuari envied them that certainty. Claire's voice came from near the altar. Father Esteban, I cannot let you die for me. If I go to him, if I surrender, maybe he will leave the rest of you alone. No, Tuari said sharply before the priest could respond. He will not leave anyone alone. Men like Moss do not show mercy. If you go to him, you die. And then he kills the rest of us anyway to make sure there are no witnesses. Tuari is right, Father Esteban said gently. This is no longer just about you, my child. This is about whether we stand against evil or bow to it. We have made our choice. Claire said nothing more, but Tuari could see her hands tightening on the rifle. She understood. They all understood. This would end in blood. The attack came sooner than Tuari expected. One moment the courtyard was quiet, the 5 men still sitting by their fire. The next moment, 2 of them were sprinting toward the chapel's side entrance while the other 3 opened fire on the front windows, their rifles cracking in rapid succession. Bullets slammed into the adobe walls, some punching through the narrow windows to ricochet off the stone floor inside. Side door. Tuari shouted. Brother Miguel and 2 other priests were already there, their rifles aimed at the heavy wood. The door shuddered as the attackers hit it, once, twice, 3 times. The barricade held. Then Tuari heard a new sound, the scrape of metal on wood. They were trying to pry the door open with crowbars. Tuari ran to the side entrance, raising his rifle. He could see the door beginning to give, the barricade shifting. Get ready, he told the priests. When they come through, shoot anything that moves. The door burst inward with a crash, the barricade toppling. 2 men surged through, pistols drawn. Tuari fired, his bullet catching the first man in the chest. The man went down hard, blood spraying. The second man got off a shot that went wild. Then Brother Miguel's rifle barked and the man clutched his shoulder, spinning away. But he did not fall. He staggered back through the door, and the priests held their fire. Reload, Tuari barked. His hands moved automatically, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a new round. The priests fumbled with their weapons, unused to the mechanics of violence. Outside, Tuari could hear shouting, the wounded man screaming for help. The front windows exploded in a hail of gunfire. Glass shattered, wood splintered. One of the priests at the front cried out and fell backward, blood streaming from his arm. Father Esteban rushed to him while the others kept firing. The courtyard was chaos now, smoke and noise and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Tuari moved back to his window and looked out. 3 men were advancing on the chapel's front door, using the fountain and scattered benches for cover. They moved with military precision, one providing covering fire while the others advanced, then leapfrogging forward. These were not amateurs. Moss had hired skilled fighters. Tuari took careful aim and fired. One of the advancing men jerked and fell. But the others kept coming. Brother Miguel fired from his window, missing. He fired again, and this time one of the attackers stumbled but kept moving. They reached the front door and began battering it with something heavy, probably a log they had prepared earlier. The door shook with each impact. The barricade would not hold long. Tuari made a decision. "Everyone fall back to the altar," he commanded. "Make a second line there. When they breach the door, we let them come in, then we hit them from elevated ground." The priests scrambled to obey, dragging their wounded companion with them. They formed a semicircle around the altar, using the raised platform as cover. Claire stood among them, her rifle raised, her face pale but steady. Tuari took his position at the front of the group, his rifle aimed at the door. The battering ram hit one final time, and the door exploded inward. Moss came through first, a pistol in each hand, his face twisted with rage. Two men followed him, rifles ready. They stopped when they saw the defenders arrayed before them, weapons trained on the entrance. For a moment, everything was frozen. Then Moss smiled, cold and terrible. "Well now," he said. "Looks like we have ourselves a proper standoff. Leave," Tuari said. "You have lost one man already. Do not lose more." "I have not lost anything yet," Moss replied. "But you are about to lose everything." He raised his pistols. Tuari fired. The bullet caught Moss in the shoulder, spinning him around. But the traitor did not go down. He fired both pistols wildly as he fell, and one of his bullets found its mark. Tuari felt a burning impact in his side, just above his hip. The force of it drove him to one knee. The chapel erupted in gunfire. The two men with Moss went down in a hail of bullets from the priests. But more attackers were coming through the door now, the wounded man from earlier and another Tuari had not seen before. Brother Miguel took a bullet in the leg and fell. One of the elderly women screamed. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of blood. Claire stood and fired. Her shot took the wounded attacker in the throat. He collapsed, clutching at the wound, making horrible gurgling sounds. The last attacker turned to run, and Father Esteban shot him in the back. The man fell across the threshold, half in and half out of the chapel. Silence descended, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the ringing in everyone's ears from the gunfire. Tuari pressed his hand to his side, feeling warm blood seeping between his fingers. The wound burned like fire, but he had taken worse. He forced himself to stand, surveying the carnage. Moss was still alive, curled on his side near the entrance, blood spreading beneath him. His eyes found Tuari, filled with hate and pain. "Should have minded your own business," he gasped. Tuari walked slowly to where the traitor lay. He looked down at the man who had caused so much suffering, who had chained women in darkness, and thought it was his right. "Men like you," Tuari said quietly, "always think the world belongs to them, that people are wreathings to be owned. But you are wrong, and now you pay the price for being wrong." Moss tried to speak again, but blood filled his mouth. His body convulsed once, then went still. Tuari felt nothing looking at the corpse. No satisfaction, no relief. Just a profound exhaustion that went deeper than his wound. Father Esteban appeared at Tuari's side, his face gray with shock. "Is it over?" the priest asked. "It is over," Tuari confirmed. For now, the priests began tending to the wounded. Brother Miguel's leg wound was serious but not fatal. The priest who had been shot in the arm would recover. One of the elderly women had taken a bullet graze across her ribs, but refused to sit down, insisting on helping the others. And Tuari, his side burning with every breath, allowed himself to finally sink to the floor. Claire was beside him instantly, her hands pressing cloth against his wound. "You are hurt," she said, her voice tight with concern. "I will live," Tuari said. "I have lived through worse. Stop being brave and let me help you," Claire said. There were tears on her face, though whether from relief or fear or something else, Tuari could not tell. He nodded and let her work, too tired to argue. Outside, the sun had risen fully, burning away the mist. The valley was beautiful in the morning light, peaceful and green, as if the violence of the past hour had never happened. But inside the chapel, surrounded by blood and bodies and the smell of death, Tuari knew that some things could never be undone. 3 weeks had passed since the siege. The bodies had been buried in unmarked graves beyond the mission walls, and Father Esteban had said prayers over them despite their sins, because that was the kind of man he was. The chapel had been cleaned and repaired, the bullet holes patched, the bloodstains scrubbed away until only faint shadows remained to mark what had happened there. Life at the mission had slowly returned to its quiet rhythms, but something fundamental had changed. Everyone who had fought that day carried a weight they had not carried before. Tuari's wound had healed well under Father Esteban's care. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing anything vital. For the first week he had been feverish and weak, but Claire had sat beside him day and night, changing his bandages, forcing him to drink water and eat broth when all he wanted was to sleep. She had saved his life as surely as he had saved hers, and the debt between them had become something more complicated than either could name. Now Tuari stood in the mission courtyard, his saddlebags packed, his Mare waiting patiently by the fountain. The horse had been found wandering near the creek where he had left her and brought back to the mission by one of the traveling priests. She looked healthy again, well-fed and rested, ready for the road. Tuari ran his hand along her neck, feeling the solid warmth of her, and tried to ignore the tightness in his chest. Claire found him there as the sun climbed toward noon. She had regained much of her strength, though she still walked with a slight limp from the damage the shackles had done. Her face had filled out, color returning to her cheeks, and her hair, now clean and brushed, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked nothing like the terrified woman he had found behind those feed barrels, and everything like someone who had discovered she was stronger than she ever imagined. "You are leaving," she said. It was not a question. Tuari had told her 3 days ago of his plans, given her time to accept it. But acceptance and understanding were different things. "Yes," Tuari said. "It is time. Where will you go?" Claire asked, moving to stand beside him. She did not touch him, did not try to convince him to stay. She knew him well enough by now to understand that his restlessness was bone deep, a survival instinct that told him never to stay in one place too long. "North," Tuari said. "Into the territories. There are places where a man can still disappear if he knows how. Places where the soldiers do not reach and the settlers have not come yet. I will find work as a scout or a guide. The skills I have are always needed somewhere." Claire nodded slowly. "And you will be alone." "I am always alone," Tuari said. "It is easier that way." "Easier for who?" Claire asked. It was the same question she had asked him weeks ago in the mission room, when he had first told her about his solitary life. This time, Tuari had a different answer. "Easier for me," he admitted. "I do not know how to be any other way anymore. The people I loved are gone. The life I knew is gone. All I have left is movement, is survival. If I stop, if I let myself feel too much, I think it will break me." Claire was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the valley. Then she said, "I used to think like that. After Patrick died, after Moss took me, I thought if I could just stop feeling, stop caring, it would hurt less. But it does not work that way. The hurt finds you anyway. And when it does, you are alone with it." "What are you saying?" Tuari asked, though he already knew. Claire turned to face him, her eyes clear and direct. "I am saying that being alone is not the same as being safe. And running is not the same as living." Tuari looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "You want me to stay. I want you to choose," Claire said. "Really choose. Not just do what you have always done because it is familiar. Father Esteban would welcome you here. You could help at the mission, teach the younger priests to defend themselves. You could build something instead of just surviving. And you?" Tuari asked. "What will you do?" Claire smiled, and there was sadness in it, but also strength. "I am staying here. For now at least. Father Esteban has asked me to help run the mission's infirmary. Apparently I have a gift for healing. Who knew? She paused. But I am not asking you to stay for me. I am asking you to stay for yourself. Tuari felt something crack open inside him. A wall he had built so carefully over so many years. He thought about what staying would mean. Safety, yes, but also connection, responsibility, the risk of caring about people who could be taken away. It terrified him more than any fight, more than any chase across the desert. I do not know if I can, he said quietly. Be that person. The one who stays, then go, Claire said simply. Go north, disappear into the territories, keep running. But know that you will always have a place here if you change your mind. This mission, these people, we are your family now whether you accept it or not. That does not go away just because you ride out that gate. Tuari looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he had not expected. She was not pleading with him to stay. She was not making him responsible for her happiness or safety. She was simply offering him a choice, and she would respect whatever he decided. It was a gift, that trust, and it made what he had to do even harder. I need to go, Tuari said. At least for now. I need to see if I can find any of my people who survived, if there is anything left of the life I knew. I need to try, Claire nodded. I understand, but, Tuari continued, the words coming slowly, carefully, I will come back. When I am ready. When I know whether there is something out there for me, or if everything I need is here. I will come back. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. I will be here. Father Esteban emerged from the chapel and walked across the courtyard to where they stood. The old priest looked at Tuari with those knowing eyes that seemed to see through all pretense. You have made your decision, he said. For now, Tuari replied. I am going north. But I will return. I believe you will, Father Esteban said. He placed a weathered hand on Tuari's shoulder. You saved that woman's life. But perhaps she saved yours as well, in ways you do not yet understand. Go find what you are looking for, my son. And when you are ready to stop running, we will be here. Tuari gripped the priest's hand briefly, unable to find words adequate to express his gratitude. Then he turned to Claire one last time. She stepped forward and embraced him, her arms tight around his shoulders. He held her carefully, aware of how fragile she still was, how much she had endured. When they separated, she pressed something into his hand. A small wooden cross, carved from mesquite, so you remember, she said. That you are not alone. That someone is waiting for you to come home. Tuari closed his fingers around the cross, feeling its smooth surface, its simple weight. Then he mounted his Mare and turned her toward the gate. Brother Miguel opened it for him, the heavy wood swinging wide to reveal the road north. Tuari did not look back as he rode through, could not bear to see Claire standing there watching him leave. But he felt her presence behind him like a physical thing, an anchor he could return to when the wandering was done. The valley opened up before him, golden grass rolling toward distant mountains. The air smelled of sage and creosote and the promise of rain. Tuari rode steadily, his body moving with the Mare's rhythm, his mind already mapping the journey ahead. He would travel to the old territories, would search for survivors of his band. He would honor the past even as he built toward a future he could not yet see clearly. Days turned into weeks as Tuari rode north. He moved through country he had known as a boy, places that held memories of hunts and ceremonies and laughter. But the land was different now, emptier. He found abandoned camps, cold fire pits, signs of passage but nothing recent. The people had scattered like seeds on the wind, and tracking them was like trying to hold water in his hands. In a canyon near the old gathering place, Tuari found his youngest brother. Or rather, he found the grave, marked with stones arranged in the traditional pattern. Someone had carved his brother's name into a flat rock, along with the date of death. 2 years ago. Tuari sat beside the grave for a long time. remembering the boy who had followed him everywhere, who had dreamed of becoming a great warrior. That dream had died with him, buried under these stones. Over the following weeks, Tuari found 3 more graves. Warriors he had known, elders he had respected. Each discovery was a door closing, a confirmation that the world he had known was truly gone. There were survivors. He heard rumors of bands living in the deep mountains, resisting still. But they were hunted, desperate, clinging to a way of life that the world no longer had room for. He met an old woman in a settlement near the border, an Apache elder who had survived by learning to live between 2 worlds. She invited him to share her fire, and they spoke in their language, the words feeling strange and familiar in his mouth after so long speaking only English. She told him stories of the old days, of the ancestors who had walked this land for generations beyond counting. But she also told him that survival sometimes meant letting go, meant finding new ways to honor the past while living in the present. The spirits do not demand that we die with the old ways, she said, her voice raspy with age. They demand only that we remember, that we carry the truth of who we are into whatever world we must inhabit. You can honor your people by living well, by building something good. That is also a warrior's path. Her words stayed with him as he continued his search. He visited 3 more settlements, spoke with more survivors, heard the same stories repeated. Loss and adaptation. Grief and resilience. The people were scattered, but they endured. Some on reservations, some in hiding, some like him walking between worlds. And slowly, Tuari began to understand that what he sought, some intact remnant of his old life, did not exist anymore. The question was not whether he could return to what had been, but what he would build from what remained. One evening, camped beside a stream under a sky brilliant with stars, Tuari took out the wooden cross Claire had given him. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight, its solidity. And he realized something that should have been obvious all along. He had been searching for a past that no longer existed, trying to resurrect ghosts. But the living, the people who mattered now, were behind him at the mission. Waiting. The next morning, Tuari turned his Mare south. The journey back took 2 weeks, and with each mile his certainty grew. He was not abandoning his people or his heritage by choosing to build a new life. He was honoring them by surviving, by finding meaning in a world that had tried to destroy him. His ancestors would understand. They had always been survivors when the mission came into view. Green and peaceful in its valley, Tuari felt something he had not felt in years. Relief, coming home. He rode through the gate as the sun set, painting everything gold. Claire was in the courtyard, helping Sister Rosa hang laundry. She looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, her hands stilling on the white cloth. Their eyes met across the distance. Tuari dismounted slowly, suddenly uncertain. What if she had changed her mind? What if the weeks apart had made her realize she did not want the complication of his presence in her life? But then Claire smiled, bright and genuine, and started walking toward him. "You came back," she said when she reached him. "I came back," Tuari confirmed. "I found what I was looking for. Or rather, I found that what I was looking for was already here." Claire's smile widened. "And what was that?" Tuari looked at her, at the mission, at Father Esteban emerging from the chapel with a knowing smile on his weathered face. "Home," he said simply. "I was looking for home." Father Esteban joined them, his eyes twinkling. "Welcome back, my son. Your room is as you left it, and we have much work to do. Brother Miguel has been complaining about fixing the irrigation channels, and I think that is work better suited to someone with your skills." Tuari laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he had laughed? "I can do that." Over the following months, Tuari became part of the mission's fabric. He repaired what needed repairing, taught the priests better ways to defend themselves, helped with the harvest. He found that his tracking skills translated well to teaching. and young men from surrounding settlements began coming to learn from him. Claire worked beside him often, their partnership easy and natural, built on shared survival and mutual respect. They did not speak of what was growing between them, did not put names to the feelings that deepened with each shared sunset, each quiet conversation. There would be time for that. For now, it was enough to wake each morning knowing no longer alone, that they had found in each other something neither had thought possible after all they had lost. One evening, as autumn painted the valley in shades of copper and gold, Tuari and Claire sat together on the mission wall, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of ripening apples from the orchard. Claire leaned her head against Tuari's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "Do you ever think about that day?" Claire asked quietly. "When you found me?" Tuari considered this. "Sometimes. But mostly I think about everything that came after. The journey. The fight. Finding my way here. I think about it all the time," Claire said. "Not because it still haunts me, but because it was the day my life changed. The day I stopped being a victim and became someone who survived." "You gave me that. You gave yourself that," Tuari said. "I just opened the door. You were the one who chose to walk through it." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, until the sky was filled with them. Somewhere in the valley, a coyote called, and another answered. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, making music of their leaves. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, Tuari and Claire felt something rare and precious. It was not the absence of pain or the erasure of what they had endured. It was something deeper, the knowledge that they had survived the worst and found their way to something better. They had been broken by different hands, healed by different means, but they had emerged on the other side still capable of hope, still capable of building a future worth living. Peace.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.